I realized that at the very core of everything that I've done was a deep curiosity and exploration of just the world around us. And I remember thinking, what am I doing if people don't need my help? This notion of curiosity of, well, what I like to do is play with ideas, is to learn new things. And by doing that, I think one of the bigger benefits is that I think it can create a tighter relationship between a parent and a child, because it's not just textbook education that they're now exposed to, it's social media education.
Welcome to Mission Activated, where we bring you the stories of individuals who've awakened to their true purpose and are living a life of passion, impact, and alignment. I'm Evelyn Clark, your host, and I believe that when you're on mission, everything falls into place. Here, we share the journeys of those who've discovered their unique path and embraced their soul's calling. It's not just about making money in life and in business, it's about making a difference, living on purpose, and inspiring yourself and others along the way. Let's get to it. My next guest is Scott Coe. He is a former C-suite exec, he's a social entrepreneur and a speaker. He specializes in leadership, business strategy, innovation, and he's the creator of the curiosity mindset. It's a way of thinking that helps people harness their practice of curiosity to feel excited by uncertainty. He's a massive cat person. You know, you've got to be either cat or dog. He's the cat. And he's really good at blending disparate concepts and perspectives together so that whatever strategies are formed come from this blend of human-centeredness. He's a beautiful guy, really interesting. And this curiosity mindset will have you thinking. It's wonderful. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the show, Scott. It is so good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really delighted to be here.
We've known each other for a little while now, and when you reached out recently, I was like, oh, fabulous. I'm so glad he wants to come on the podcast because the way your brain works is just fascinating, I have to say. How's that for an intro?
Okay. That's very flattering, very humbling, and I can only hope that I can share some of the, weird and wacky ideas that come through.
I bet you will. I'm so excited about this. Tell me, Scott, where do you live in the world?
I live in southeast Melbourne, down in Victoria, in Australia, for anyone who might be listening from overseas. For people who are interested in custodianship and land ownership, I'm on Boonwurrung country of the Kulin Nation. And so, yeah, that's where I've lived for perhaps the past 35 years or so.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, we're in the same time zone. It's quite rare for me to have someone in the same time zone. So that's wonderful. Now, I'm going to get straight into it. This is all about Mission Activated. And I would love to know, first of all, what mission you're on and who you're serving.
Absolutely. The mission that I'm on right now can be best summarized as wanting to help people around the world become just a little bit more curious. Within that, I don't mean, hey, let's ask more questions. It's a deeper understanding of the practice of curiosity, what it means to interrogate and challenge what we know, but how we engage with others as well. I think quite a few of the problems that we sometimes see, whether it's at a more societal level, such as misinformation or polarization or this fractured information landscape, through to how we as people show up in our work, in our lives, that sometimes that practice of holding our ideas lightly to be able to question them, to change them around, it's fundamental now. I think more than ever, this is the type of thing where a skill set of discernment, of reflection, these become really, really important. And so for me, this has underpinned so much of my life. And now I'm at that stage where I want to be able to share everything that I've learned or ideas or the different ways of thinking, as you mentioned, with as many people as I can. Although I will say, in terms of with who, I am very interested in education. Very interested, of course, in just the broader organizational business sort of landscape. But fundamentally, if people are feeling stuck, or if people are finding it difficult to reconcile challenging conversations or challenging mindsets, that's where I feel like I might have something to offer people as a way forward.
Fascinating. I'm so excited about this, and we're going to delve more into that in a little bit. But first, I'd love to know what brought you here. Like, you didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be the curiosity mindset guy and I'm going to empower people to, get comfortable with being uncomfortable and, and being able to hold these disparate ideas and be curious. There's a journey you've been on. And I would love for you, please, to share with us what's that journey that you've been on that's brought you to where you are today?
Absolutely. And I really love this question because I think I could only have articulated what I'm doing now. It's one of those things where, as we go through our lives, we start off in school, we try new jobs, we try new careers, and sometimes they're just pathways that have been set out for us, especially in the case of education and early careers. But for me, it's been a real deep reflection. And I think a lot of it triggered during COVID, that especially for people who are in Melbourne, longest lockdown in the world, that type of a situation, there was a lot of deeper reflection about what it was that I actually did. Because if I if we look at my early career, I've done all sorts of things. I cut my teeth at a Big Four consulting firm. Then I went off to study a master's of marketing. Then I rejoined the consulting sector and did a lot of consulting work for the government. And so I cultivated this deep passion for understanding how community works and how society functions and ways of being able to help there. And then at some point, I put a stop to that and just said, you know what, I want to go try something different. And so I founded and launched my own social enterprise in the arts sector, of all things, even though I'm not a practicing artist and I don't have a background in there. And so a lot of these things on the surface, you might look at me and go, well, what's this guy doing? Like just pinging back and forth between all these different things. But when I had this deep reflection, I realized that at the very core of everything that I've done, even if I couldn't put words to it, was a deep curiosity and exploration of just the world around us, of different skills, of different hobbies and different experiences. And all of those things in my brain would just jumble together. And that's sort of how I showed up. So I'll give you an example. So even when I was working as a management consultant in the public sector, if I was asked to produce a new dashboard report for stakeholders, it wasn't just, okay, well, here's the template, I fill it in, there you go. It was, well, how do I make this more effective? How do I get it to do the thing that we want people to do, which is make better decisions? And so into that, I would mix in things that I've learned about web design, about graphic design, about photography. And so I was coming up with all sorts of just different things, not change for the sake of change, but something that helps elevate and maybe make the work we do a bit more meaningful. And I couldn't really describe why I was doing any of these things until I had that deep reflection during COVID and realized that really what I was doing is engaging every part of the experience that I've had through a bit of a lens of curiosity, so to speak, and then harnessing that and allowing that to help shape everything that I do. And as a result, nowadays, when I talk about going out and doing curiosity mindset type of work, it is that almost complete engagement of every part of who we are. And this is why I'm so sort of passionate about this. It's the sensation of holding everything lightly, but not, again, disrespecting our experience or disrespecting the expertise of others. It's integrating all of that together. And that for me is what, I guess, brought me to this point. Um, that COVID period especially was just that deep reflection. I kept going deeper and deeper into, well, yes, I do innovation. Sure. Yes, I do strategy. Sure. That's just another hat that I wear. But what drives me? What is my purpose within all of that? And when I even removed this notion of, well, LinkedIn profile, I help people do so and so. And I remember thinking, what am I doing if people don't need my help? And asking myself that question. And that's when I really clicked onto um, this notion of curiosity of, well, what I like to do is play with ideas, is to learn new things, because I think that makes me more well-rounded, more open, more open to diverse perspectives, which allows me to show up in a more holistic way for whomever I might work with or help.
Okay. Wow. Very interesting. In the deep reflection period that you had during lockdowns, and you look back at the different career paths that you had, was there a thread? You said that there's curiosity, but was there another reason why you chose the things that you did? Was it to do with the human experience? Was it because of something else? Or was it just something you were naturally drawn to?
I think this is something I was naturally drawn to. I think if we go back even a little bit further into my childhood, I had a pretty independent childhood. And so I spent quite a lot of time in my head. I thought a lot about the way that I think, but equally I was fascinated about, what are the factors that influence the way that I think? And that kind of opened the pathway down into work in, say, the public sector or the social enterprise sector. Um, I think that, we exist, in this world, in communities with people. And it's really, really interesting to see how people congregate together and come together to do things. So, for example, when we talk about, oh, government is bad as a throwaway line, or media is this, or big corporations are that, it always strikes me that at the heart of all of them are just people, just messy people, imperfect people doing the best that we can. And so, a different way of, I guess, articulating this passion and this thing that connects through everything is this deep appreciation of psychology, but also sociology. Because I don't think you can have one without the other. The environment that we're brought up in will have a profound impact on who we are. So recognizing that, like, why is government set up the way it's set up? How do laws come to be? These things, why is business set up in the way it's set up? And it's, again, just people at the heart of it. And yes, we set up systems and processes and bureaucracies and all that type of stuff, but it's also just people doing that. And so being able to hold both together, that's always been where I've played. And that's always been what I've done. Even if I didn't know that that's what I was doing, that was ultimately what I was doing.
What was the backdrop for your education? So, I mean, I grew up actually in Melbourne, through the school system, very Western. We talk really and about the school system in the communities I'm in. So I'm wondering about yourself. Did that your schooling system, did that have a strong imprint on you to, provide some kind of a seed of implantation of, that's carried you through this journey?
Um, to an extent. Okay, so for context, for anybody who's listening who haven't seen, I haven't seen any photos or anything like that. So my background is Chinese. I grew up in China, but I actually came to Australia when I was 6. So by and large, I was exposed mostly to, let's call it the Western education system. Obviously, which is not serving as a critique of any sort. Like, that's just the landscape I grew up in. And throughout all of that, I think I had um, I won't say a challenging experience with education. I think that there were a lot of things that I learned that I didn't really understand why I was learning. So, as a simple example, I almost failed English quite a few times, not because my English was bad, but because I didn't really engage with things like Shakespeare or the Greek tragedies. And so, for a while, I couldn't relate to a lot of the things that I was talking to, that was being taught to me. And as a unabashed admission, there was a Japanese cartoon that I watched called Evangelion. And this, more than any other piece of media, probably had the most profound effect on me, because all of a sudden, here's a story that I am interested in. It had quite a lot of deep philosophical undertones. It's quite messed up, actually. But that kick-started, I would say, quite a lot of this personal exploration into how I relate to the world and to education. Like, it's almost stark, the difference between me before I watched this show and then me after I watched this show. Before, I was just someone that's just skating by in the education system. I'd come home, play games, whatever. But afterwards, all of a sudden, I found this urge to research, to learn more. It's like someone had shown me how to better think about the world. And so that, coupled with, I guess, a independent childhood, just meant I got to spend a lot of that time in my head. And that's my point about these are the things that kind of underpinned everything going forward. You know, I'm very fortunate, I guess, that I didn't fall in with the wrong crowd, so to speak. And that the people and the conversations that I was drawn to, even back in high school, were these big questions about, you know, why are we here? What are we doing? And all those types of things. And so I think what's happened is that that habit became ingrained throughout everything that I did, in every part of work, in my conversations, in my friendships, in how I showed up anywhere. There was always that reflection of, well, how am I reacting to this? What else can I learn from this? And over time, that became a practice that I've now essentially called curiosity. But really within that, we're talking about epistemology. We're talking about phenomenology. We're talking about sociology. You know, the books like that I love reading are books such as Sapiens, such as The Origins of Political Order, because there's so many things that influence who we are. And those things, I think these days it's easy for people to not engage as deeply because there's so much information out there. But that's the part that's really important. You know, it's to be able to engage and reflect and be open to all of that.
It feels to me that what another way to describe part of the practice that you're talking about is conscious awareness and conscious leadership, and through the way that you're thinking. And I'm really fascinated by this personally as well. And as a parent, you know, I think I look at my children. I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I wonder, you know, is there something else I should be giving to my boys who are teenagers? And what else can I give them to help them think critically, to help them be open-minded and be able to hold 2 differing points of view at the same time? I believe this is so important. You effectively have been self-taught and then, of course, influenced by your Japanese show. How old were you when you watched that?
Probably slightly too young because it kind of gets quite violent in it as well. I think I was about maybe um, 14 or 15 at that age, which is when I first engaged with it. Um, and well, and to your point, and this is why I'm sort of passionate about working and looking at the education sector. I'm not aware. I'm not sure if you're aware that there's this bit of research that seems to demonstrate that curiosity and creativity drops as kids go through the education system. You know, so roughly around grade 2 to 4, it's just that creativity and curiosity starts to plummet a bit. Whereas, you know, 5-year-olds is full of questions, full of curiosity and wonder. And I find this really interesting, right? Because part of it is, I think, you know, the education system, if we take a step back and look at it, it's there to impart a body of knowledge that has been essentially robustly tested for the most part over time, right? We don't need kids to reinvent mathematics like every day of school. So there's value in learning from established systems. But by the same token, it means that sometimes education can become a little bit more rote, right? Just because we test based on, well, how do you demonstrate this knowledge? And really great teachers understand how to demonstrate that behavior, but so too, I think, to your point as a parent, that we're familiar with the phrase "it takes a village," and especially in a Western context where there is a bit more of an emphasis on individuality. Finding your own path, making your own way through the world. Well, where do kids get this type of role modeling from? Where do they get this behavior from? For me, I'm very fortunate that I guess I ended up on this path, but it makes me really think about, how do younger children engage with this type of behavior? And that's why I think um, more than just the academic pressure, which again, coming from a Chinese background, there was a great deal of that. Just get A's, right? Just A pluses. Anything less is not good enough. But to go deeper than that, to say, well, what did you learn? And why did why is this important? How is this relevant? And I think, as I became a bit older throughout my education, I became that slightly annoying student in, say, a maths class, where I was trying to ask, why is understanding this type of equation useful? Because we can do these complex equations and formulas, but I'm just like, but how would I apply this? How is this relevant to my life?
Mm,
And
mm.
so wanting to cultivate that becomes, I think, really profoundly important, especially for the next generation.
Couldn't agree more. I'm fascinated by this conversation, the way that you're presenting this, and the application to not just, I guess, our peers, the maybe entrepreneurs, uh, professionals, but also the younger generation. And for the record, I'm a parent of, this year will be 2 homeschooled children, and one of the reasons that I pulled them out of school originally was because I wanted them to have more of, I guess, an open experience. And I wanted to encourage them to see their schooling system and experience for what it was. So, because I'm always questioning and looking at things, I'm not the kind of person that just sits and accepts the status quo on everything. And it sounds to me like that's what you do that's just your practice, the way that you apply it. How impactful could that practice be for parents who want to, perhaps maybe they don't have the luxury or the opportunity to homeschool or the ability, but maybe they want to, enable their kids to have more of that open mind? What
Mm.
what what do you think they could do there?
Well, I'll take one step back first and go back to my earlier point about the role of education, right? Because like I said, the part of education is knowledge. And, as I mentioned, it's not that we need kids to reinvent everything that they learn. Like, there's a established body of knowledge on physics. There's an established body of knowledge on chemistry. History, slightly biased in different areas that they may be, is still a document that establishes prior knowledge. And so I think it's important to recognize this, right? And even if we take education in that formal framework out of it, there are some bits of knowledge that we might pass down to our kids just through, so for example, don't stick a knife in an electrical socket, right? Like, we don't really need kids to be experimenting with that to learn that particular life lesson. So within a broader, call it, community or system, how might we best impart this education to the next generation? Right. And that becomes really profound and really, really important, because not every parent may have the capacity to teach, um, to learn about that history first. And as someone who's also, because I've done some lecturing as well, so for me to kind of get up to speed on all these different topics so I can impart it, there's a lot of work and a lot of effort in there. So kudos to you for pursuing a homeschooling path. So I just wanted to acknowledge that system and why that system exists. But then within that, if we picture that as like a preset course, if we zoom in, then each individual student is the dot that's working its way through this maze or this tree of knowledge, so to speak. And this is where we get to that individual level of there's different personality traits, there is propensities and interests in different areas, there's passions in different areas, there's natural proclivity for some students are more left brain, right brain, some are more creative, some are more sort of prefer a bit more structure. How might we help navigate that? And that's where I think the role of the parents come into it. Because at some point, if we go out of school and we say to students or to young people now, well, how do you make sense of the rest of your world? We don't have textbooks for everything. And even if we do, sometimes those textbooks might be wrong. We can swap out a textbook for a business book or a leadership book or a framework that someone else has put together and started to market. Everything like this is another piece of education. So how might we then choose to engage with something like that? See, so this for me is that practice of curiosity. And so I think the best thing for parents to do is to be able to demonstrate that behavior with their kids. That we're not saying that parents have to be experts in maths to support them, but taking that shared interest in where they're focused on at the moment becomes, I think, vitally important. Within that, I think I reflect back on my childhood, with Asian parents who are very academic oriented. It sometimes did feel like they weren't as interested in my interests. And it felt like there was a big part of me that was disconnected because, well, I was really interested in a whole bunch of other things that I thought enriched my life experience, but they were looking at it from a pure academic perspective. And so that's why I think it has become important, is encouraging and taking an interest with kids. And by doing that, I think one of the bigger benefits is that I think it can create a tighter relationship between a parent and a child. Because especially as kids now have access to smartphones, it's not just textbook education that they're now exposed to. It's social media education. The number of kids now who are just like, oh, I learned this on TikTok. Well, that's sort of also education, just presented in a different way. So if we're not interested in that, then it makes it harder to kind of help demonstrate that type of critical thinking with kids. And so I think that becomes the most important role that a parent can demonstrate. And the one last thing I'll say on this is that I know that there has been a trend, especially in Australia, where more and more parents are looking to the schools to provide that guidance. And I think that there is a bit of a trap there, because the schools are now, as a result, kind of being stretched in what they originally set out to do, which is provide education. And education, it's not that there's always a subject on how to be better human being, right? How to be a more curious person. It's kind of down to a little bit of luck that we get the right teachers that know how to instill that behavior. So to round this whole thing out is to treat it as a village. We're all involved in supporting students cultivate this skill.
If you're loving this conversation and want to dive deeper into purposeful work, then it's time to thank the 6-Star Leaders community for making this episode possible. The 6-Star Leaders are a group of purpose-driven business owners committed to doing business differently by embracing their unique genius and skills to make a real impact. It's a space for learning, growth, and truly becoming empowered in everything that you do. If you're ready to discover your own 6th star, go to bit.ly/6starcommunity-intro and book a chat to learn more. We look forward to seeing you. Brilliant. I love it. Couldn't agree more. And I love how passionate you are about this. It's really fascinating. And I hope for the listeners who are parents, you're loving this and really getting how important it is, and also how simple it is to do as well.
I sometimes remind myself of what I was like as a teenager. And I think it's very easy for us as adults to go, well, I know the world as it is now, and our kids should be doing this more, or should be doing this, should be doing that. But we were all teenagers. And there were always phases in our life where we were rebellious and we did want to push against authority because, of course, we're teenagers. That's what we do. Of course, we knew all the answers to the world. We were the smartest kids, right? Yeah, we were all the smartest kids and we knew everything. And whenever that type of pressure comes through, for a teenager playing with that sense of trying to figure out who their identity is, the more pressure that gets exerted down to just say, just get good grades or just do this. I mean, for every student that has maybe thrived in that pressure, will be several students who completely shut off and disconnect and disengage, right? And so many times, I see these case studies or reports, stories from parents who thought that their kids were going off the beaten path, but just not realizing that their kids had a different type of interest. And so taking that interest, whether it's going out for a walk and playing Pokemon Go with them, might be a way to say, hey, let me go to where you are as a student, as a child, or as a teenager. Take an interest. And then from there, it just increases the likelihood that we can be a role model and be an influence, because just taking things away doesn't really solve the problem. And if anything, it might drive students and kids towards negative role models, right? Where kids start to hide what they're doing because they feel like they might be judged for it, right? So, and the point is that yes, there is a role for things like discipline. There is a role for guidance. That's important, but just from a purely punitive perspective, that is what can drive bigger wedges, I think.
I agree. I'd love to talk more now about the curiosity mindset and how you are bringing this to the world.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, curiosity for me is not the same as asking more questions. I sometimes when I look across the world of thought leaders, you look at your Simon Sinek's, your Brené Brown's, we need more vulnerability. How? Oh, we start with curiosity. And it just always got me thinking, what does that really mean? How does that inform the types of questions that we ask? And so for me, when I've kind of gone deeper into this world of research and to form, I guess, my own frameworks for how I think about this, I'd probably break it down into three major influencing factors. One, the environment that we're in. So that means the physical space, the cultural space, the cultural landscape, even down to the language. All of these things have an influence on how we think. Simplest example I can give for this, just think of any time that, we've traveled to a new country or gone somewhere different and our minds have just clicked. This thing I didn't understand. Now it makes sense. I've thought differently. That's the role of space. That's the environment that we're in. Then it's things like beliefs, opinions, the things we learn, the skills that we pick up, the books that we read, our worldviews, which are, influenced by some of that spatial parameter. So then it's understanding, well, what beliefs do I hold about something? How right am I in holding that belief? How much can I back it up? And that evolves over time. As we get more mature, we develop more refined understandings of some of those beliefs. And then finally, it's our emotions. So if I wake up and I've had a terrible night's sleep, I'm in a bad state of mind, that also has a role in how we engage with the rest of the world. So all these three things, I would argue collectively, have an influence on how we engage with the rest of the world. And thus, if we have a deeper understanding of this, then imagine what it's like to be able to play around with all those configurations, to understand it's like, well, if someone's given me a piece of feedback that I don't like, is it because we're in the wrong space? Is it because there's a perspective that I'm missing? Or is it because I'm just woken up on the wrong side of bed? So even a simple understanding of what makes up the things that influence the way we think can then have a subsequent impact on curiosity. So that's understanding us. But then going out, the way I sometimes like to think of it is, well, again, if we just tell people, just go forth and be curious, we can very easily end up off the beaten path somewhere, which may be wonderful, right? But it can also be very distracting as well. So some of the ways I think about it is this notion of focused curiosity. So going deep on something, I like to call this microscopic curiosity. So as we enlarge the resolution on the challenges we face, maybe there's something deeper that we don't understand. Telescopic curiosity, where we start to look further afield and look at history, we look at the future, we look at different possibilities. And then the final one is like a kaleidoscope, where we take everything we've learned and we jumble it all around. And you can see within all of this, there's analysis, there is the blue sky type of thinking, the open-minded type of thinking, and then there's divergent thinking. So I'm not making these words up just because they sound cool, but because it's a way of framing a lot of the research and literature that's around this space of how we think and how we engage with the world. And so in terms of how I want to help other people practice this curiosity, it starts with that understanding. It starts with, well, what do we know? So for a question to be asked, there's something that we don't know. But what makes up that thing that we don't know? Is this question a valid question? If we just kind of play around with our understanding of something, maybe the question completely changes, right? So that deeper analysis and that deeper understanding, that's the practice that I love to be able to help others with, so that when we're confronted with conflict and challenge or, gaps in our knowledge or misinformation or arguments, we're able to hold all of that a little bit more lightly so that we feel excited by uncertainty.
I wonder, as you're speaking, and you provided such a brilliant description of this framework, and I was right there with you through all of the kaleidoscope, the whole lot. It's like, wow, this is amazing. I wonder, for someone listening to this, what might be some challenges they're experiencing that this new curious mindset could help to alleviate? So what might someone be going through that, or experiencing, or behaving, or operating in a certain way that's causing them some level of discomfort? Because mostly people respond to pain and fear, right? Otherwise, why do it?
Absolutely.
And unless they can see some kind of benefit, that kind of, I want to improve or grow. You know where I'm coming from? So what might inspire someone?
Well, firstly, I love this question because, and thank you for pointing this out, because you're right. Ultimately, it's either pain or it's an aspiration, right? And if we go back to the most universal set of pains, healthy, wealthy, wise, it's somewhere in there. Maslow's hierarchy comes into it, right? But I think where some of this might start to manifest, I think everyone will have an intuition for how that pain might manifest. So, for example, it might be within a family. I mean, certainly, I think pretty much everyone has been through some sort of family politics where it's like this other family member just does not understand what we're talking about. And we see this, especially in this modern day of political discourse, right? If someone voted this direction, they're ostracized, right? And I find that sad because, just despite holding difference of opinions, like there's still ways to be able to engage and understand each other. And so how that pain might materialize is people who might feel frustration with others, who might feel frustration in their conversations with families or friends or work colleagues, and it's just I don't like these conversations. I don't like how we're always arguing about these things. I just don't understand how they could think this way. And if we give in to that frustration, then we do end up going into our own sort of echo chamber of issues. And so look, for some people that might be fine. That might be what they want to do, sure. But there is, I believe, pain there, and how we try to make sense of the world. But equally, if we go to the other side, it's, for people who are, say, in business, And a lot of business is about adaptability. It's about growth. I mean, there's AI disruptions galore now. So how do we grow that? How do we sort of survive? How do we adapt? How do we thrive? And within this, I think like the example with the school system, education works on a system. Businesses work because we set up systems to help us leverage skill sets and tools in technology. But it's how we think about it. So and we see even large companies get stuck because they get into a bit of that sort of fixed mindset. And so if anyone's struggling with, I'm working hard and I'm doing all the things I think I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm still getting nowhere, well, this is the point I wish to say, well, let's challenge what is it that we understand of our business. Are we doing the same things and expecting something different? How might we see things in a different light? How might we change how we think about engaging with customers, for example? Do we know enough about what our customers want? Do we know enough about how the demands have changed? These are all questions that, if we think about things a little bit more lightly, it starts to illuminate what the problems are. So these are some of the pains that I think people can, that this type of mindset might be able to help. And you see, this is why I sort of say it's difficult to just say, sales are dropping. It's like, sure, but well, what's contributing to that?
Yeah.
My staff aren't listening to me. Okay, why is that? Is it you? Is it your staff? Is it your communication? Is it the space? Is it hybrid? Is it like, what might that be? All of these things can benefit from sometimes just asking more questions to better understand each other, ourselves, and the world.
So interesting and so helpful, Scott. I love it. How might someone approach this if they are schooled in, say, EQ, emotional intelligence, and they hear you speaking about this? Do you have a reference for the difference between the two?
Totally. So with EQ, emotional quotient, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
um, I think that is part of the fabric of who we are, right? So when I was talking about the framework before, I mentioned that the core part of it is the emotional self, right? And I can very much appreciate that anybody listening to this so far might think that I'm talking about this from a very intellectual perspective, which I acknowledge. It's kind of how I started out in life. But I think the same notion applies, right? Which is, well, what triggers the emotions? What triggers how we respond to things and understanding the emotions of others as well. So, for example, I've written before about empathy, and that there's this understanding of empathy, which is putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, seeing what they see, feeling what they feel. But I think the pathway to empathy is being quite radically curious about that. And again, I don't mean just intellectual, right? It's recognizing that, let's say if I'm trying to empathize with you, I can't really empathize with you fully because, oh, well, I'm not a mother. I don't have children. I don't have, so you have a completely different life experience than I do. So the best thing that I can do, right, is try to, through your words, through our conversations, intuit what your world is like, what your life is like. And then I compare it to mine. And I try to create this facsimile of experience, right? And so this is where I think that EQ component comes into it too. You know, I'll use a different example here, and I appreciate this is a little bit intellectual, but sort of bear with me on this. But through a language barrier, so Chinese, for example, in China, there isn't really a literal translation for curiosity, not in the way that we've been talking about it, right? So the literal translation of curiosity typically infers the childlike wonderment, of a toddler as they go around and look at everything. And so when I was, for example, talking to my mother about this, she just couldn't conceive of what I was doing because our shared language and our shared conception of the world was so vastly different. And I think the same occurs with things like emotions, So if I say I'm frustrated, how does that hit with all the people I talk to? Some people might go, he needs help. Some people might go, oh, well, that's just a small thing. You can walk it off, right? But some might feel like a deeper sense of connection to that. And so everyone, this is going to hit differently for everyone. And so even with emotions, I think there's a lot that can be said about, well, in like just reflecting into that, and it doesn't have to be a mental engagement. It is sitting with the emotion. And, when we talk about the world practice of meditation and mindfulness, it is a little bit about that, right? It is a little bit about kind of being able to let go of emotions or ideas. And I guess what I'm arguing for and what I'm proposing is it's not just letting go. We let go of it, but it's still there. So it's the acknowledgement of it and how we also might play around with that, and how we reflect on our emotions, because our emotional range changes over our life. So for those people who are listening from that EQ perspective, I hope that gives a bit of a clue or gives a bit of insight into how this practice of curiosity can also deepen our emotional understanding of each other.
Yeah, that's what a great answer. It's fascinating, Scott. I was just looking at the time and I'm like, oh my God, I could talk to you for 2 hours. This is brilliant. I would love to know, what was the point at which you went, I'm on path. The activation of your mission was realized.
Yeah. And this is a great question, because I think, as I said right at the outset, this pathway wasn't one that was immediately clear to me a while ago. And I think I got to a point. So one of my recent roles about a year and a bit ago was I was in an organization called Leadership Victoria. I was there as the acting CEO and the COO. And what was interesting is that, so at that stage, I hadn't yet really formalized or refined some of this thinking, but there was a practice there that I continue to essentially experiment with. And I think it was through that experience where all of a sudden I was stepping into a position that I didn't have that much experience with. This was my first sort of C-suite role, working with different people with difficult challenges, because it was a time of COVID. There was a lot of upheaval, and there were some really challenging experiences that I had there. And there was one incident where there was just, call it a tense conversation that I had with someone. And instead of kind of being taken aback, it was a challenge, right? It was a challenge to, I guess, who I am as a person. And instead of going, oh, how dare they, challenge me in this way or whatever, or how dare they kind of impugn me, or or oh, maybe I'm not the person I need to be, and it just triggered all these questions about who I am as leadership in a role of leadership. I dropped into that practice of curiosity and just went, oh, well, this is interesting. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what's happening in this space. I wonder what the beliefs were. I wonder what emotional undertone may exist here. And that kind of just helped me really clarify, I guess, some of these frameworks. And I mean, that's one example, but I've since continued to deploy that across all of the work that I've done to kind of continue to practice it. And the more I've done it, I guess, the more I've seen a reinforcement from the workshops that I've run, through the summits that I've helped to facilitate. It's creating all those little conditions that speak to each of those components, and then just observing what the behaviors are like afterwards. And so for me, it's not just, I got a feedback score of 9 out of 10 or an NFP of, 9 out of 10 or something like that. It's when comments are like, oh, I never realized I could think about this challenge in this way. I never realized that I had a misunderstanding of what that person meant when I said this thing. I never realized that this, let's say something like imposter syndrome, right? Which I know is can be a sensitive topic for some, right? Is that, oh, actually, it's not that it's just a straight up boogeyman. That actually, no, there's a different way of looking at it. One that embraces what this anxiety, might have done for us. It may have served us in some way. And so all of these together, listening and observing that type of behavior, that for me was some of those mini reinforcement points across the past couple of years that gave me the clarity to say, yes, I think I'm on the right path.
Do you have days when you don't feel connected to your purpose or the mission? And if you do, how do you overcome that?
All the time. All the time. And I say that, and I really want to be quite genuine and authentic in reflecting that. I'm so mindful of this information landscape that we're in with thought leaders and influencers, and everyone's talking about things like got to find your purpose or you got to find your passion. And, once you've found your purpose, hold on to that. And I think it's always struck me that the operative word in finding purpose is not purpose, but it's finding, because that's the journey, right? The purpose that I have now, I could not have articulated 5 years ago. The purpose I had then, I could not have articulated 10 years before that. And if by some chance my circumstances change, then my purpose may change yet again. And so for me, whenever I go through those moments where I feel perhaps disconnected, I don't fight against it. I kind of work with it. It's like the EQ conversation, right? It's just another part of me, and I embrace that. I think it was Adam Grant, I believe, who made this point about how sometimes self-doubt is not quite self-doubt. There's also idea doubt, right? There's also perhaps delivery doubt. There's also experience doubt. Like all of these little things that can sometimes be useful in just, for me, it helps me constantly check to kind of go, am I going on the right direction? So for me, if I had to almost paint a picture for what we've been talking about with curiosity, right? It's that it's not about having a map and that this plan will take us to this destination. And if we follow this, we'll get there. Sure, that helps. It's a guideline. What it's really about is that we have a torch, we have a direction, and we use these signals to help guide us in that direction. But if we stay where we are right now, which is being present at the moment, we can constantly course correct, right? And we can look up to go, are we going in the right direction? But then we look back down to go, well, where are we now? And are there different pathways? And you can sort of see that when I talk about this ongoing practice of curiosity, it's being able to hold that. And sometimes, yes, it's going, yes, no, I am feeling doubt. I am just going to work my way through this. And that's fine. And sometimes it's going, you know what, I'm just going to sit with it for a bit and let it percolate away and maybe talk to a few different people and engage with a few experiences that I haven't engaged with before, right? And then I come back to it. And then usually a few days later, I'm like, actually, no, yeah, I am on the right path. I am happy with where I'm going, and I'll continue to embrace this journey with its ups and downs.
But the key thing there that I got then in the way that you left it and then you came back to it and you embraced it, and was that you weren't pushing, you weren't resisting, and you weren't making it wrong or bad. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
There's a good friend, colleague of mine, and she teaches consciousness. And one of the concepts that she's imparted to me over the last couple of years is treat life like a river. It's never a straight line. Right? And she has this saying, and I've mentioned it before, I think on the podcast as well, be the river. And when she described it, I really understood it, and if we see life like this river and there's a current, there's energy and there's flow, we don't know the bend or the angle of the next bend or anything like that. But the degree to which we will go down the path, down the river, is dependent on how much we let go and we just be the river. If we stick our foot in or we hold onto the sides and resist what's coming up and we say no and we judge and we analyze, and then we're resistant and we're not going to move and we might hit the sides and we might create more tension for ourselves. So I had this in my mind as you were talking then about your process. And it feels to me like you're putting context around the tool or a way in which we can be in the river.
Absolutely. And if I may, yes, and onto that, I think what we're really trying to do is also teach people how to swim with the river, right? Because let's call it the shadow side of going with the river is that we can get pulled into the currents, into eddies in the corner. We may get stuck. We may end up on a sandbar and get nowhere. And it's like, well, I'm one with the river, but I'm getting nowhere, right? And so I think the almost the thing that I want to impart for people is it's that we can still move in the river. We can still have an ability to course correct, and that's where sometimes pushing can be useful, right? Especially if we kind of know, well, that part of the river is going to be too deep for me, and it looks too dangerous. I'm going to go in this other direction. So there is the power of agency within all of this, and I think that's fundamentally the really important thing is that we can be empowered to have agency to, choose the course that we correct. But exactly to your point, neither do we want to just fight the river constantly, but it's knowing when to go with it, when to fight with it, and when to just, enjoy the moment of it. And so if we circle this all the way back to talking about something like education, education in some ways is here are the signposts. Here's the things that you might want to try and avoid. Here's some techniques that many people use for navigating different parts of the river. But if we only just do that, then we're also sort of just being taken by the river too. It's being able to say, well, you can traverse the river in different ways. Here comes a branch. What if you try to build a raft with that? Maybe you could do that, so there's power, I think, in something like that. And so that's been with the journey too.
There's so much in there, Scott. So many good, juicy bits. And I'm looking at the time. So, I would love to just keep going. I want to thank you for your knowledge and wisdom and everything that you've shared today. And I'm sure that our listeners have just gotten so much from this, like I have. When's the book coming out?
Yeah. Soon. One day, look, I'm already working on different chapters of the book. But for, again, you see, I know that there's a destination somewhere, but I'm not, I guess, trying to force myself down that pathway. I will push towards it. In the meantime, I do write articles. I am on Substack. I know we'll sort of share links and things like that, but I do talk about these things. I do try to write about these things, and I bring them as they come to mind. And over time, I'm sure that will coalesce into the book that I'm happy to share with everyone and to help students, parents, leaders, professionals, to be able to reconnect with that curiosity that they had as a kid, and to equip everyone with that flashlight so we can navigate our own paths.
You're the perfect guide for this, Scott, I have to say. It's an absolute pleasure listening to you and speaking with you about this and learning from you. And for the listeners, yes, please check out Scott's Substack. Is there any other way people can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. Feel free to check out my website, which is just scottco.com. And I'm more active on LinkedIn. So you can always find me there at the Scott Co. And I'm on all the different platforms, but that's the one where I hang out the most. So always happy to have a conversation, always happy to explore if anyone's feeling stuck or uncertain, or feeling like we're just doing the same thing over and over again, then yeah, I'm always here to help. That's what I really want to do, is just to help everyone with this little bit, just a little bit of curiosity. That's all.
It's a little bit, but it's so powerful. It's it's life-changing. Last question for you, Scott, before we wrap up. Is there a nugget or a little piece of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think we've covered everything in everything that we've sort of talked about today. But if I had to distill it, it really just comes down to holding what we know lightly and with openness. The things that we learn can sometimes serve us in many powerful ways. I'm talking about knowledge, heuristics, habits. We set them up. We can also refine them. We can also continue to remain open to it. And just because we know something doesn't mean that that thing is always correct. And so sometimes just holding that lightly, it starts with us. For me, it's not, I want to make other people curious. I have to demonstrate this in every part of my life. Any conflict that I've experienced, any challenge that I've had, it started with, let me just ask a couple of questions. Let me sit with things lightly. So if there's one takeaway, one nugget there, it's just that bit of reflection. Like when you're meditating, just a little bit of reflection. How did I come to know this thing? What is this ultimately about? And don't just let go of it. Engage with it lightly as well.
Beautiful.
I hope that helps.
It really does. Scott, it has been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you so much for your time and your energy and for you watching that Japanese cartoon all those years ago. That's brought you to where you are today.
Shout out to Evangelion. If anyone hasn't watched it, it's still a great show. I mean, it has morphed into quite a few sort of sub-series, but the original is great. I wouldn't recommend watching it with like a 10-year-old because, like I said, it does get quite violent, but it is a great show.
Thank you for that. Have a brilliant day, Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Mission Activated. If today's conversation resonated with you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Remember, your mission matters. When you live on purpose, not only do you transform your own life, but you inspire others to do the same. Until next time, stay aligned, keep activated. I'll see you then.